So it can
But
start.
in that notice, it's 5:30.
Let me check.
We are starting. Yeah, we are starting now. Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. Namaskar. Good evening and adab to all those listeners who have joined in today. Today is a special session. Of course, this is a session of poetry and prose for seniors today, as we know. And I'm your host, Dr. Sajni Vaidya. Today's is a very special session because we are going to celebrate the life and work of two legends who have contributed greatly to literature. One is Suryakant Tripathi Nirala in Hindi literature and William Wordsworth for English. Let's learn a little bit about these two. You know, we have read great poets and poets in our childhood during school and college, but over the years, we've lost touch with their poetry. And this is a good way to catch up and, refer to what we had learned and learn a little more about them, because I'm sure we are now more mature and we can understand their work a bit better than we used to when we learned them first. Right. So I'm just going to put on my presentation and share my screen with you. Yes, you can all see that.
Yes, ma'am, we can see.
Right. So I'll just start the slideshow for you. Suryakant Tripathi Nirala. Suryakant Tripathi Nirala was born in Bengal in 1896. And he had actually done his education, basic education in Bengali. But he's had unki zindagi mein, let me speak in Hindi because it's a Hindi poet that we are discussing. उनकी जिंदगी में बहुत ही अर्ली एज में दर्दनाक किस्से हुए. 3 साल की उम्र में उनकी माता जी गुजर गई और 13 साल की उम्र में उनके फादर. He has had repeatedly a lot of unfortunate incidents, but in spite of that, he wrote fantastic poetry. 13 साल की उम्र में उनकी 15 साल की उम्र में उनका विवाह हो गया था एक मनोहरा देवी से, जिन्होंने इन्हें प्रेरित किया कि वो हिंदी सीखें. और हिंदी इस तरह उन्होंने सीखी और इस तरह उन्होंने निभाई कि वंडरफुल कंट्रीब्यूशन इनका हो गया हमारी साहित्य में और वे अमर हो गए. उनकी कविता जो थी सरोज स्मृति, जो इनकी बेटी के देहांत पे उन्होंने लिखी थी, वो बहुत ही लोगों के दिल छू गई और उनकी कविता धीरे धीरे अमर हो गई है. मैं निराला जी की आपको एक कविता सुनाना चाहूंगी जो है वरदे वीणा वादिनी वरदे. ये जो गीत है वो बहुत ही लोगों ने सुर पे सजाया है सरस्वती वंदना की तरह. वरदे वीणा वादिनी वरदे, प्रिय स्वतंत्र रव, अमृत मंत्र नव, भारत में भर दे. वरदे वीणा वादिनी वरदे, काट अंध उर के बंधन स्तर, बहा जननी ज्योतिर्मय निर्झर, कलुष भेद तम हर प्रकाश भर, जगमग जग कर दे. वरदे वीणा वादिनी वरदे. नव गति नव लय ताल छंद नव, नवल कंठ नव जलद मंद्र रव, नव नभ के नव विहग वृंद को, नव पर नव स्वर दे. वरदे वीणा वादिनी वरदे. उनकी जो कविताएं थी और हिंदी स्पेशली इतनी सरल नहीं थी, लेकिन फिर भी इतने फीलिंग्स और इमोशंस से वो लिखते थे कि लोगों का दिल हर दिया. और he is referred to as Mahapran Nirala ji. In spite of all the difficulties he faced in life, he stood strong against everything, and he wrote this poem जो सकारात्मक से भरी हुई है. मैं आपको ये शॉर्ट पोएम जो है वो सुनाऊंगी अभी. अभी न होगा मेरा अंत, अभी न होगा मेरा अंत, अभी अभी ही तो आया है मेरे वन में मृदुल वसंत, अभी न होगा मेरा अंत. हरे हरे ये पात, डालियां, कलियां कोमल गात, मैं ही अपना स्वप्न मृदुल कर फेरूंगा निद्रित कलियां पर, जगाकर एक प्रत्युष मनोहर पुष्प पुष्प से तंद्रालस लालसा खींच लूंगा मैं. अपने नवजीवन का अमृत सहर्ष सींच दूंगा मैं. द्वार दिखा दूंगा फिर उनको, है मेरे वे जहां अनंत, अभी न होगा मेरा अंत, अभी न होगा मेरा अंत. मेरे जीवन का यह है जब प्रथम चरण, इसमें कहाँ मृत्यु, है जीवन ही जीवन. अभी पड़ा है आगे सारा यौवन, स्वर्ण किरण कलोलों पर बहता रहे बालक मन. मेरे ही अविकसित राग से विकसित होगा बंधु दिगंत, अभी न होगा मेरा अंत, अभी न होगा मेरा अंत. ये इसमें हम देख सकते हैं कि कितनी सकारात्मक भरी हुई है. In spite of all the hardships that he had faced, he had actually lost a lot of his family members very early in life. But in spite, and you know, to lose a daughter is by absolutely. Sorry, I think the video was off. Something is wrong with that, but never mind. Enjoying this poem is really fantastic, and his language, his Hindi, absolutely amazing. In spite of being educated in Bengali first, he had mastered Hindi to a great extent. I will now request Anjali ji to read out her poem. Anjali ji, आप यहाँ हैं, आप unmute कर सकती हैं.
Yes.
And you'll also get 30 seconds to say something about the poem if you wish to. Yeah, each one
Yes.
of you. Yeah.
Yes. Thank
Yes,
you.
Anjali.
Thank you, Sajni ji. Thank you very much. और सूर्यकांत त्रिपाठी निराला जी के बारे में कुछ शब्द कहना भी चाहती थी मैं, कि एक तो वो छायावाद के कवि थे और खड़ी बोली में लिखते थे, और उन्होंने जो है वो हमेशा विषय की विविधता और नवीन प्रयोगों को बहुलता दी थी. और श्रृंगार, रहस्यवाद, राष्ट्र प्रेम, प्रकृति वर्णन और इन सब का तो चित्रण उन्होंने किया ही था अपनी कविताओं में. उन्होंने शोषण और वर्ग भेद के खिलाफ बहुत आवाज उठाई थी. वो शोषितों और दीनहीन लोगों के प्रति सहानुभूति रखते थे और इसलिए हमेशा अपनी कविताओं में आवाज उठाते. और उनका जो मेन वो था कि निराला जी जो थे वो एक, इसलिए उनको हम क्रांतिकारी कवि कहते थे, क्योंकि वो हमेशा गरीब और उनके प्रति विद्रोह अपनी कविताओं से जाहिर करते थे.
जी, अभी आप हम आपकी सुनेंगे कविता स्नेह निर्झर बह गया.
जी, तो उनकी जो ये कविता है स्नेह निर्झर बह गया, इसमें उन्होंने अपने आप को प्रकृति से जोड़कर उसका वर्णन किया है और प्रकृति से अपने आप को भी कंपेयर किया है कि कैसे जब एक पेड़ सूख जाता है तो उसको क्या 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 फील होता है, वो इस कविता में उन्होंने व्यक्त किया है. स्नेह निर्झर बह गया, रेत तन रह गया. स्नेह निर्झर बह गया, रेत तन रह गया. आम की यह डाल जो सूखी दिखी, आम की यह डाल जो सूखी दिखी, कह रही है अब यहाँ पिक या शिखी नहीं आते. पिक कहते हैं कोयल को और शिखी कहते हैं मोर को। तो अब यहाँ पिक या शिखी नहीं आते, पंक्तियों में बह हूं लिखी, जिसका नहीं जिसका अर्थ, नहीं जिसका अर्थ, और जीवन दह गया है, जीवन दह गया है। दिए हैं मैंने जगत को फूल फल, ये पेड़ कह रहा है कि दिए हैं मैंने जगत को फूल फल, किया है अपनी प्रभा से चकित चल, पर अनश्वर था सकल पल्लवित पल, ठाठ जीवन का वही जो ढह गया। उनका कहना था कि जो जीवन का जो ठाठ था वो उस समय था जब मैं चरम पे था, और अब वो धीरे धीरे ढह रहा है। तो अब नहीं आती पुलिन पर प्रियतमा, अब नहीं आती पुलिन पर प्रियतमा। पुलिन कहते हैं गीली भूमि को, जो रेत की जो भूमि होती है उसको बोलते हैं। अब नहीं आती पुलिन पर प्रियतमा, श्याम तृण पर बैठने को निरुपमा, श्याम तृण पर बैठने को निरुपमा, बह रही है हृदय पर केवल अमा, अमा अमावस्या की घोर अंधकार को कहते हैं। मैं अलक्षित हूं यही कवि कह गया है, मैं अलक्षित हूं यही कवि कह गया है। बार बार प्रिय करुणा की किरणों से भर देते हो, बार बार प्रिय करुणा की किरणों से भर देते हो, शुद्ध हृदय को पुलकित कर देते हो। मेरे अंतर में आते हो देव निरंतर, मेरे अंतर में आते हो देव निरंतर, कर जाते हो व्यथा भार लघु, कर जाते हो व्यथा, व्यथा मतलब पीड़ा, पीड़ा, और लघु मतलब कम कर जाते हो। अब बार बार कंज बढ़ाकर अंधकार में मेरा रोदन, बार बार कंज बढ़ाकर अंधकार में मेरा रोदन, और सिक्त धरा के अंचल को, सिक्त धरा के अंचल को करता है क्षण क्षण, कुसुम कपोलों पर वे लोल शिखिर कण, तुम किरणों से अश्रु पोंछ लेते हो, तुम किरणों से अश्रु पोंछ लेते हो, और नव प्रभात जीवन में भर देते हो। तो एक नई उमंग और तरंग भी लाते हैं, और साथ में उसकी व्यथा भी व्यक्त करते हैं, ये नव प्रभात जीवन में भर देते हो। थैंक यू।
Wonderful. Thank you so much. That was really lovely. निराला जी हमें पता है कि सिर्फ कविताएं नहीं लिखते थे, उन्होंने छोटी कहानियां भी लिखी हैं, निबंध भी लिखे हैं, और कई पत्रकारों के संपादक भी रहे हैं। तो he has a big body of work. I would now like to invite अनुपम जी, आप अपनी कविता पेश करें। इनकी आप अपनी सिलेक्शन पेश करें निराला जी की कविता की, वो तोड़ती पत्थर, और उसके बारे में कुछ कहना चाहेंगे तो कह सकते हैं।
जी थैंक यू। सबसे पहले तो आपको बहुत बधाई निराला जी को चुनने के लिए, और फिर अंजलि जी को शत शत नमन, क्योंकि निराला जी अधिकतर अतुकांत लिखते थे, तुकबंदी में, राइमिंग में उनका भरोसा नहीं था, लेकिन अंजलि जी वो एक रेयर जेम चुनकर ले आई जिनमें एक्चुअली तुकबंदी थी। क्योंकि जब हम अनइनिशिएटेड को इनिशिएट करते हैं तो राइमिंग हेल्प्स इन अंडरस्टैंडिंग पोएम। तो निराला जी की एक विशेषता तो ये थी कि वो सभी रसों में लिखते थे, उनकी कविताएं अलंकार से भरी हुई होती थी, कंपैरेटिव्स बहुत सुंदर होते थे, लेकिन वो छंद का या तुकबंदी का ज्यादा लिहाज नहीं करते थे। इन दैट रिगार्ड ही वाज अ रिबेल। और जहां वो एक तरफ समाजवाद की बात करते थे, दूसरी तरफ वो प्रगतिशीलता की बात करते थे। और मैंने आज जो कविता चुनी है वो शायद इसीलिए चुनी है क्योंकि इसमें वो दोनों ही पहलू नजर आते हैं। और कविता का नाम है वो तोड़ती पत्थर, और कहीं ना कहीं ये उनकी एक बेहतरीन कविताओं में से है, क्योंकि ये एक कहानी भी है। आप अगर इसे ध्यान से सुनेंगे तो इट हैज अ लॉट ऑफ ग्राफिक डिटेल्स, आपको लगेगा जैसे आप देख रहे हैं उस स्त्री को। तो मैं प्रस्तुत करती हूँ वो तोड़ती पत्थर, निराला जी की अद्भुत कविता। वो तोड़ती पत्थर, देखा मैंने उसको इलाहाबाद के पथ पर, वो तोड़ती पत्थर। कोई न छायादार पेड़ व जिसके तले बैठी हुई स्वीकार, श्याम तन भर बंधा यौवन, नत नयन प्रिय कर्म रत मन, गुरु हथौड़ा हाथ करती बार बार प्रहार, सामने तरु मालिका टालिका प्रकार। तो यहां पर आप देखिए वो उसको भी डिस्क्राइब कर रहे हैं कि वो अभी अभी उसकी जवानी आई भर है और वो काम में कार्यरत हो गई है। वो उसको ऐसे भी डिस्क्राइब कर रहे हैं कि जिस पेड़ के तले वो बैठी है उसमें छाया तक नहीं है, और वो उसको इस तरह से भी डिस्क्राइब कर रहे हैं कि उसके बिल्कुल सामने, जहां पेड़ के नीचे बैठी हुई वो पत्थर तोड़ रही है, उसके बिल्कुल सामने बहुत बड़े बड़े मकान और कोठियां भी हैं। मैं इसे एक बार फिर दोहराना चाहूंगी, बस यही स्टैंजा, एक बार लय आ जाएगी तो फिर आपको और आनंद आएगा। तो वो तोड़ती पत्थर देखा मैंने उसे इलाहाबाद के पथ पर, वो तोड़ती पत्थर कोई ना छायादार, पेड़ व जिसके तले बैठी हुई स्वीकार, श्याम तन भर बंधा यौवन, नत नयन प्रिय कर्म रत मन, गुरु हथौड़ा हाथ करती बार बार प्रहार, सामने तरु मालिका अट्टालिका प्रकार। चढ़ रही थी धूप गर्मियों के दिन, दिवा का तमतमाता रूप। चढ़ रही थी धूप गर्मियों के दिन, दिवा का तमतमाता रूप। उठी झुलसाती हुई लू, उठी झुलसाती हुई लू, रुई ज्यों जलती हुई भू। उठी झुलसाती हुई लू, रुई ज्यों जलती हुई भू। गर्द चिंगों सा छा गई, प्राय हुई दोपहर, वो तोड़ती पत्थर। इतना कुछ हो गया और वो वहीं बैठी पत्थर तोड़ती रही, बिल्कुल अविचल। चढ़ रही थी धूप गर्मियों के दिन, दिवा का तमतमाता रूप। उठी झुलसाती हुई लू, रुई ज्यों जलती हुई भू। गर्द चिंगी छा गई, प्राय हुई दोपहर, वो तोड़ती पत्थर। देखते देखा मुझे तो एक बार, देखते देखा मुझे तो एक बार, उस भवन की ओर देखा छिन्न तार। देख कर कोई नहीं, देख मुझे उस दृष्टि से, जो मार खा रोई नहीं। सजा सहज सितार, सजा सहज सितार, सुनी मैंने वह नई जो थी सुनी झंकार। एक क्षण के बाद वह कांपी सुघर, ढुलक माथे से गिरे सीकर। लीन होते कर्म में फिर ज्यों कह गई, मैं तोड़ती पत्थर, मैं तोड़ती पत्थर। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
वाह वाह वाह, बहुत ही खूब, बहुत ही खूब. Thank you so much for that selection, Anupam. And the picture, the poem draws, in front of your eyes is amazing. And your recitation was absolutely fantastic, Anupam. So thank you so much. Our next participant is Sanjeevani, and she will be reading the poem Bhikshuk by Nirala ji. Sanjeevani, please put on your video and unmute yourself.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, we don't see you.
Thank you.
Yes, there you go. Thank you so much.
मैं कुछ मतलब उनके बारे में, मतलब सर के बारे में बोलना चाहती हूँ,
जी जी.
निराला के बारे में.
Yeah, you have half a minute. Yes.
भिक्षुक मतलब ये परिमल जो संग्रह है, संग्रह वो 1930 में प्रकाशित हुआ उनका.
जी.
नामक संग्रह जो है वो 1930 में प्रकाशित हुआ. और परिमल यानी के भिक्षुक और भिक्षुक यानी के भिखारी. तो उन्होंने उनके बारे में, भिखारी की अवस्था क्या रहती है उनके बारे में बहुत ही अच्छा कहा है. तो मैंने वो कविता अभी सिलेक्ट की है मैं आपके सामने, और उनके बारे में और बोलना चाहती हूँ. निराला जी इनके बहुमुखी प्रतिभा के वो एक धनी थे, धनी साहित्यकार थे, मूलतः कवि थे और छायावाद के प्रवर्तकों में से एक थे. इनके काव्य में सहानुभूति, पाखंड और प्रदर्शन के प्रति व्यंग इनके काव्य की विशेषताएं हैं. अब मैं कविता ही शुरू करती हूँ, और उस कविता के बारे में जो मैंने विवरण किया है वो भी मैं बता के जा रही हूँ. चलेगा ना?
जी जी.
थैंक यू मैडम।
आपके पास 4 मिनट का समय है, आप करिए प्लीज।
हाँ बोलती हूँ। दो टूक कलेजे के करता, दो टूक कलेजे के करता, पचता था पथ पर आता, पेट पीठ दोनों मिलकर है एक, चल रहा लकुटिया टेक। एक ऐसा भिखारी, एक ऐसा भिखारी जो रास्ते पर भीख मांगते फिरता है, पर कोई भी रोटी नहीं देता, पर कोई भी रोटी नहीं देता। भूख से इतना वो बेहाल हुआ है कि जिसका पेट और पीठ एक हो गई, जिसके कलेजे के दो टुकड़े हुए है, ऐसा भिखारी लकड़ियां टेकते हुए जिस पद पर वो खड़ा था, उसी पद पर आकर वो भिखारी भीख मांगने के लिए खड़ा होता है, भीख मांगने के लिए खड़ा होता है। स्टांजा जो सेकंड है उसके बारे में मैं पढ़ती हूँ अभी। मुट्ठी भर दाने को भूख मिटाने को, मुंह फटी पुरानी झोली का फैलाना, साथ दो बच्चे भी है, साथ दो बच्चे भी है, सदा हाथ फैलाते, बाएं से वे मलते हुए पेट चलते हैं, और दाहिना दया दृष्टि पाने की और बढ़ाए। मुट्ठी भर अनाज पाने के लिए पुरानी फटी हुई झोली को आगे फैलाता हुआ, जिसके साथ उसके दो बच्चे भी हैं, जो बाएं हाथ से खुद के पेट पर हाथ घुमाते हुए लालच भरी नजरों से लोगों की और देखते हुए दाहिना हाथ उनकी ओर बढ़ाते हैं कि कोई हमें रोटी तो दे दो, कोई हमें रोटी तो दे दो। भूख से सुख और जब जाते, दाता भाग्य विधाता से क्या पाते। घूट आंसुओं के पीकर रह जाते, घूट आंसुओं के पीकर रह जाते। उस भिखारी के भूख से ओठ सूख गए हैं, जिसको पेट में खाना ना गया हो, उसका कितना हाल होता है, शायद उसका दिल ही जानता है। वह भिखारी भाग्य विधाता से दया की भीख अगर मांगे, तो वह भी क्या कर सकता है भला, तो वह भी क्या कर सकता है भला। एक अनाज का तिनका भी अगर उसके पेट में ना जाए हो, कम से कम पानी की जगह आंखों से निकले हुए आंसू ही पीकर उसके लिए काफी रह जाता है, उसके लिए काफी रह जाता है। चाट रहे झूठी पतल वे कभी सड़क पर खड़े हुए, और झपट लेते को कुत्ते, उनसे कुत्ते भी है अड़े हुए, झपट लेने के लिए कुत्ते भी है अड़े हुए। आने जाने रास्ते पर ही किसी ने तो झूठे पतेले रखे, जिस पतेले के आजू बाजू थोड़ा बहुत खाना चिपक गया था, वह खाने के लिए वह भिखारी खड़ा था, लेकिन उस भिखारी के इर्द गिर्द पालतू कुत्ते खाने पर टूट पड़ने के लिए तैयार थे। ऐसे में उस भिखारी को खाना कहाँ नसीब होगा। थैंक यू।
Thank you very much. That was really wonderful. And we can see the range of Nirala ji's poems. वो क्रांतिकारी और समाजवादी तो थे ही, और इतनी he has written about so many conditions of people, and you can see the heart. Yes, right. I'll just read a little bit about this description of महाप्राण निराला युग पुरुष और युग नायक थे। विषमताओं से I'm not getting the whole thing over here. Sorry.
Ma'am, at your right side.
Sorry.
screen. When you share the screen, there is one minus button. You have to click on that. So you'll be able to read all.
Okay, right. Yeah. महाप्राण निराला युग पुरुष और युग नायक थे। विषमताओं के बीच जीवन व्यतीत करते हुए उन्होंने विष पिया और समाज को अमृत दान दिया। उनकी रचनाओं में मानवीय संवेदनाओं एवं जन सरोकारों का चित्रण साफ झलकता है। महाकवि निराला स्वाभिमान और करुणा के साकार रूप थे। एक तरफ जहां वे महान विनम्र थे, वहीं कठोर भी थे। स्वाभिमान उनकी सबसे बड़ी पूंजी थी। उनकी सरोज स्मृति बेटी के प्रति संवेदनशीलता को बखूबी दर्शाती है। वे आजीवन विषमताओं के खिलाफ संघर्ष करते रहे। महाकवि निराला की जन्मभूमि क्रांतिकारियों की धरती रही है। उनका साहित्य क्रांति से ओतप्रोत रहा है। इनकी रचनाओं में शासन सत्ता से संघर्ष का रूप देखने को मिलता है। निराला का जीवन निराला ही था। महाप्राण निराला जी की रचनाओं में लोगों के जहन में उन्होंने सदैव जीवंत रखेंगी। He will be absolutely, his work is immortal in our minds. So now we shift on to the later half of our program, which is based on William Wordsworth. And I have with us Rekha Uttam. She's an HR professional and takes workshops on public speaking, but she's a fantastic poet in her own right. Welcome, Rekha, and I leave the floor to you.
Thank you, Sajni. Can I get screen share permission, please?
Yes, we have the access, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Just let me share my screen. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I just want to see if I can slide on. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
It's amazing. Was there a particular reason that you chose Nirala and Wordsworth together, Sajni?
Honestly, no, but I've always been impressed by these two, and these two stood out first in my mind. So I said, let's try them.
Okay, but it's so amazing that they have so much in common. Both are bound by losses. Both had a passion for nature. Both were revolutionary in their own right. And that's amazing that when we think of bringing together two people, how much, instead of dissonance, how much more common things are there, common thread that runs through their poetry, their lives. And it's amazing that two people, two different eras, two different countries, two different languages, yet our messages are so universal. And that's what poetry is all about, that wherever we are, what comes out from our heart as poetry is universal. So let's look at Wordsworth. William Wordsworth, I'm not going to give you a lot of details about him because you can Google it. So why should I just put that up? But what is specific, what is significant of, what is the significance of Wordsworth in English literature? How has he shaped our thoughts? Let's look at that. When we look at a poet, we need to look at the environment that he was in, the influences that shaped him, the experiences that molded him. So what was the environment when William Wordsworth was living in the 1700s, 1770 to 1850? England was going through recession. The French Revolution was happening. Britain was tired of wars with the French. At the same time, East India Company was establishing itself as a trading commercial entity, a corporate in the Far East. In Britain, people were tired But the social system was coming apart, because the social system till then was the feudal landlords and the vassal tenants, the commoners, and there was a distinct category of classes, the upper class and the lower class. That's the environment. Who are the people who shaped him? You can see, I have put pictures of Wordsworth, different faces, as a young man, as a middle-aged man, as an old man. The two people who have significantly influenced him are, one is his sister, Dorothy Wordsworth, and the other is Samuel Taylor Coleridge, the famous of the Kubla Khan, the poet who wrote Kubla Khan. Wordsworth's childhood was again full of losses. Lost his mother at a young age, separated from his sister for 9 years, lost his other siblings in war and in illness, lost his own children. In fact, the loss of his last child at the age of 42, he completely stopped writing after that because he just couldn't take it anymore. Into the loss, and this thing came like a breath of fresh air, Coleridge. And why were they together? They were thinking of social reforms, that poetry is not just for Dante and Milton to write, but it could be of the commoners. And this was a revolutionary thought. And hence, they were kind of taking a reclusive break in Grasmere, which is the countryside of England, where the Lake District is. And that's where the collaboration of Coleridge and Wordsworth came about. And this is the scenery that inspired the poetry, the River Wye, the lakes, the hills, the pasture lands, which came out, all the pastoral poems. And the lyrical ballads were inspired by this scenery. And if you look at it, what were they saying? They were saying that poetry is in everyone's heart, not just a few. Poetry is not limited to just a few noble people, but it is of the common person. And that's where the thought came from. So when he looks at, if you look at Tintern Abbey, he says, no, perchance I would be with, sorry, just let me just try to minimize this. Yeah.
Maximize.
No, perchance if I should be where I no more can hear thy voice, nor catch thy wild eyes, these gleams of pure existence with thou, then that forest, this is more dear both for themselves and for thy sake. This he's addressing to his sister, Dorothy, and saying that this scenery becomes more poignant to me because you were walking with me along these streams. So nature and relationship, it was intermingled into his poetry. He was called the father of the Romantics because till then, in an England which is governed by the Church of England, Puritanism at its peak, where everything was related to God, religion, and the state, here were people who were saying that nature is what is going to teach us. So, started as a project with Coleridge. Coleridge they collaborated and published the lyrical ballads. Coleridge put the Rime of the Ancient Mariner, Wordsworth's Tintern Abbey, and Idiot Boy, which is a description of a common man. And Coleridge wrote on his own son, Frost at Midnight. So Wordsworth's definition of poetry was that it's a spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. And his theory was that poetry should be written in the language really used by men, not some superfluous, fantastic words just put in there to impress, but it should be of the common men. So their goal in publishing lyrical ballads was to write poetry which reflected on the lives of humble, rustic people. And that's what they did. They brought in the cottage, the pastoral fields, the flowers, the most innocuous things in nature. So Daffodils, I'm sure on that poem, but it's like by sharing and reading of his sister's diary. She was a prolific diary writer. He took his inspiration from that to write his poems. And I'm sure we're going to listen to Daffodils a little while later. So I'll move on to that.
Do you want to have it read, then you continue, or you would like to have it read later?
Sajni, only because I have to leave. Otherwise, I would have wanted it inserted here. But
you're doing a fantastic job, Rekha. Please continue.
Thank you. Otherwise, I would have loved to have that poem here. Just I don't have time.
So interesting. The presentation is so interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So the other famous poem is Prelude. And one thing that we have to think, and I kept thinking as I was reading, and this thought has come to me before as well, is that in Prelude, the Prelude was written actually as a poem dedicated as a tribute to his friendship with Coleridge. The original title of the poem was Poem to Coleridge. But this was published after his death by Mary Hutchinson, his wife, and they changed the name to Prelude. And I'll come back to that thought. Let me go to his children. He had 3 sons and 2 daughters, and this is Dora, who at the age of 42 died in 1842. Wordsworth himself died in 1850, but from 1842 to 1850, he only revised his previous poems, but never wrote a new one. He was also disillusioned with the society, and we will come to that later. But the influence of loss was so huge in his life that by the time Dora left, because he had lost Catherine at the age of 9 with measles, Thomas at the age of 4, so John at the age of 2, his heart was heavy. His whole spirit it just could not take it anymore and didn't find the inspiration to write the poetry. He was not a rich person. He had a legacy given by a friend called Raisley Calvert, which was £900 a year, and they had to make do with that. And sometimes I feel that trials and tribulations also bring out the best in us, in the sense that the best of poetry flows. He was 7 years the Poet Laureate of England. Not that he got any income from that. He was not even sure that he wanted to write anything as a Poet Laureate. And the then Prime Minister, Robert Peel, told him that it's okay, you don't have to write anything. You just have to be the Poet Laureate of England. So these were his livelihood and his achievements. And then you look at the lyrical ballads, you can keep it aside, and then come the Lucy poems, and then comes his sonnets. These are the 3 different phases in his poetic journey. What were Lucy poems about? It's still being debated. Now they put in psychological theories to it and say that it was his frustration of having to live with his sister away from Coleridge. Or it was his own fear of losing his sister, like how he had lost others. The Lucy poems are 5 poems composed between 1798 and 1801. This was while on a short visit to Germany. He also had a previous marriage to a French woman, and he had a child, Caroline, by that. Was he reflecting on that loss? Was he reflecting on Dorothy? We just don't know, but it is his, it portrays a man, not just a man's, but humanity's fear against the oncoming this thing of nature, that death is inevitable. And we all have to face losses. There is no way that we can escape that. How does the heart, how does the soul take in that loss and still live on? We all live on with our losses. And Wordsworth, with his words, makes it easier for us to live, because there are these poems that can be read and we can really get inspired by that, right? Let's look at some of the immortal lines from William Wordsworth. And I'm not encroaching into any poetry, but you need to understand where this mind was coming from. There is definitely an Eastern influence, though it's not said. Somebody has done a research and published a paper saying that he was influenced by the Bhagavad Gita, because you can see karma, reincarnation, of having different lives again and again as a theme in his poetry. So here it is. A deep distress hath humanized my soul. It's our agonies, it's our anguish that makes us human. That's what he says, right? He learned in Tintern Abbey the still sad music of humanity. In Intimations of Immortality, he says the loss of his power to see the things he had once seen, and he laments that the celestial light that seemed to lie over the landscape of his youth, like the glory and freshness of a dream, and that he seemed to be losing it again and again, right? And then come the specific lines where he says, our birth is but a sleep and a forgetting. What is that? This is just straight from the Bhagavad Gita. You feel that where you are discarding your dirty clothes and going into a fresh new set of clothes, right? I mean, it's as parallel as that.
Yeah.
Soul that rises with us, our life's star, hath had elsewhere its setting. It has set somewhere to rise here as me or you or anyone else. That's what he's saying. Isn't that a very Oriental thought, not a puritanical church thought? And cometh from afar, not in entire forgetfulness and not in utter nakedness, but trailing clouds of glory do we become. From God, who's our home, heaven lies about us in our infancy. Where do we come from? He's asking that question. And that just shows that how he sees in nature the destruction, the creation, and the sustaining of life over and over again, cyclical. And that's what touches his heart. The face of this romanticism, of seeing the commoner as capable of, much more than what he's been assigned to, gets disillusioned a little bit in later years. He realizes that the commoners also are as greedy, as wanting power, and he's so disappointed that his disillusionment with the common man comes in this poem where the world is too much with us. These are the sonnets which he wrote in his later years. The world is too much with us, late and soon, getting and spending. We lay waste our powers. Little we see in nature that is ours. Means our nature is not what is shown in the true nature, because we are much more meaner as human beings. That's what he's saying. We have given hearts away, a sordid boon. He is lamenting the fact that we have let go of our morals, and this is, we are talking about 1840 up to 1850. He was fed up with the social structure that, in spite of socialism, in spite of the commoner getting a more powerful role in society, nothing in society changes. The greed is there. The power play is still there. The hating of each other is still there. And still money seems to be that matters to everyone. So that disillusionment apart, let us just
look at what he was.
Yeah,
Bliss was in that
we
dawn
have
to
a
be
little
alive.
short of time, so if we can please wind up a little. Yeah,
But to be young was very heaven. When from our better selves we have too long been parted by the hurrying world and droop sick and of its business, of its pleasures tired, how gracious, how benign is solitude. Dust as we are, the immortal spirit grows like harmony in music. There is a dark, inscrutable workmanship that reconciles the discordant elements, makes them cling together as one society. And that's what he wanted the society to be. Sadly disillusioned, but left us with a treasure trove of beautiful language with which we can create our own preludes, our own poems, our own sonnets. Thank you, everyone, for your patient listening. And
thank
over to
you
you,
so much,
Sajni.
Rekha. Thank you so much, and you really answered my prayers when I requested you to, give us a little short introduction to his life and work. And you've given us such a fantastic analysis of both the influences in his life and the work as well. So that was really wonderful. I know you put in a lot of effort and time behind it. So thank you so very much.
Thank you, Sajni. And thank you, everyone, for listening. I just have to go somewhere else, and that's why let me take
you are
I'll
excused,
join
Rekha,
another
but
time.
please
Thank you.
join us again with so much
For
of your fantastic contribution. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Bye.
So it was really wonderful, the comparison also that she brought out with William Wordsworth and Nirala ji. We see how both their lives were influenced by so many losses, and how that influenced their poetry as well. Both being so concerned about bringing about a change in society, as well as bringing poetry to the common masses. Because as we all know, poetry touches each one of us. Each one of us have emotions, and each one of us needs to, bring that expression into it. So I will request Nirenji now to recite the Daffodils for us, that wonderful, well-known poetry from William Wordsworth, which we learned in school.
So you have already heard a lot about him. So I'll just go to the poem right away.
Yes,
Daffodils.
please.
Yeah. Daffodils by William Wordsworth. You know his love for nature. So I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high over vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils, beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. Continuous as the stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way, they stretched in never-ending line along the margin of a bay. 10,000 saw I at a glance, tossing their heads in sprightly dance. The waves beside them danced, but they outdid the sparkling waves in glee. A poet could not be gay in such a jocund company. I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth the show to me had brought. For oft, when on my couch I lie, in a vacant or in a pensive mood, they flash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. And then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils. So beautifully expressed.
So beautiful, really. I mean, it's one of the best, one of my favorite poems on nature. And he's really described it so beautifully. Thank you so much, Nirenji, for that. And now, Mr. Zoeb Lal, will you read us your selection upon Westminster Bridge?
This William Wordsworth brought the memories of school days.
Exactly.
And we had this in what we called SSC exams. This came in Antonio D'Souza in Bombay. And as an engineer, I would say this was a time of England when the steam engine was invented. And what used to happen is the sky in London used to become black because of the coal mining. The wind blew the coal black smoke towards the city. And one fine morning, when Wordsworth and his sister Dorothy were riding a coach, and they came upon the Westminster Bridge, and he saw that the sky was so blue that he was just amazed. And he told Dorothy, what is happening? This is the best scene I've ever seen. And immediately he wrote this poem. They were going towards Dover in 1802 when they hit upon this bridge. And then he comes along.
Yes, let's listen to the poem. Wonderful.
For the romantic poet who wrote this sonnet. And it's so calm. When you read it, it makes your heart so calm, and your mind goes back to nature, as everybody knows. And he kept on, looking at the sky, then looking at the road, and then he wrote this poem upon Westminster Bridge. Earth has not anything to show more fair. Earth has not anything to show more fair. Dull would be of soul who could pass by. Somebody who passed by and doesn't see this is dull of the soul. A sight so touching in its majesty. This city now doth, like garment wear, the beauty of the morning silent bear. Ships, towers, domes, theaters and temples lie unto the fields and to the sky, all bright and glittering in the smokeless air. Because the mornings, there was no smoke in the air, and he was so happy to see all this. Never did sun more beautifully steep. The sunlight was so bright because the smoke, it goes down. So now it was so bright. So he says, never did the sun more beautifully steep. In his first splendor, valley, rock and hill, never I never felt a calm so deep. The river glided at his own sweet will. The Thames is gliding so calmly. The river glided at his own sweet will. Dear God, the very houses seem asleep, and all that mighty heart is lying still. Thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful. See, we had these poets who were so concerned with environment, with pollution, and they've written so many lovely poems to bring our attention to the wonders of nature and how important that is in our lives. I'll now request Lakshmi Ravichandranji to read her selection, Lines Written in Early Spring.
Yes. Hello. Good evening to everybody. Hello, Sajni.
Good evening. Good evening. Good evening.
Yeah. So today I have chosen the lines written in early spring. Of course, written by the great William Wordsworth. So just give me a minute. Yeah. So can I start straight away?
Yes,
or
please. Yes,
because
please.
we've heard enough of William Wordsworth beautifully.
Yes,
I really
yes.
enjoyed it. Yeah. So lines written in early spring. Can you all hear me? Am I audible?
Yes, we can. We can hear you.
Thank you. I heard 1,000 blended notes while in a grove I sat reclined in that sweet mood when pleasant thoughts bring sad thoughts to the mind. To her fair works did nature link the human soul that through me ran, and much it grieved my heart to think what man has made of man. Through primrose tufts in that green bower, the periwinkle trailed its reeds, and it's my fate that every flower enjoys the air it breathes. The birds around me hopped and played, their thoughts I cannot measure. With the least motion which they made, it seemed a thrill of pleasure. The budding twigs spread out their fan to catch the breezy air, and I must think, do all I can, that there was pleasure there. If this belief from heaven be sent, if such be nature's holy plan, have I not reason to lament what man has made of man? So this is a beautiful poem. Again, it's all about environment and the anguish this romantic poet had thought and expressed even centuries back is really amazing. And also, it is very painful to see that even today we are still grappling with all global warming and environmental issues.
Exactly.
So the reason I chose to read this poem is that these issues are very close to my heart also. And I earnestly wish someday I would really constructively contribute in a very small way, at least, to this earth, to this planet.
Yeah,
Thank you.
wonderful. Thank you so much for that selection, Lakshmiji. It was very beautiful. And it is the reason why these poets are immortal is because they dealt with subjects that are relevant for us today.
Exactly.
That's why they are immortal, because they have dealt with these topics, you know. I will now call upon Narendra Chawla-ji to read his selection, The Solitary Reaper. Yes, please. Can you unmute yourself, Narendra-ji? Narendra-ji, can you please unmute yourself? You are not, yeah. Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, thank you very much, dear Sajni. You have created a very nice campaign, because I am extremely happy and overjoyed because Sajni met at this juncture of life to me, that she has reviewed, renewed, and refreshed me. I passed my MA in 1971, 48 years before, and I remind the days when I studied these poems, and before that, about 50 years before, I did my Hindi post-graduation.
Yes, wonderful.
But
it does take us back to those school days of ours, you know, college days of ours. That's why we are doing this, right? Yeah.
On that day, when you gave us this titles of Nirala ji and William Wordsworth, so immediately I reminded Todti Patthar. But when I saw that this has been already opted by my sister Anupam, perhaps I may not be wrong or right, I don't know. Anupam ही है जिन्होंने लिया है वो. तो मुझे कुछ नहीं लगा, मुझे अच्छा लगा, because after that I studied and I went through this all poetry, and I found there is a unique coincidence and similarity between Solitary Reaper and Todti Patthar.
Wow.
What a fine coincidence. The both pictures, the both poems gave us just a glimpse and scene, as live scene of the story. So here I don't want to waste your time, and this is I'm reading because as Rekha has already given us the full scriptures, full
that's
life
why I
of
asked
William
to do
Wordsworth. So no need to explain so many things, but I want to tell the viewers and listeners that William Wordsworth lived near lake. So his all poems are related to the nature. And this Solitary Reaper is also a ballad type poem in which a Scottish girl cutting ripe crop and singing a murmuring and song which the poet does not understand the language, only he gets the tune. So I read it. Behold her sickle in the field, you solitary highland lass, reaping and singing by herself, stop here or gently pass. Alone she cuts and binds the grain and sings a melancholy strain. Oh, listen, for the vale profound is overflowing with the sound. No nightingale did ever chant more welcome notes to weary bands of travelers in some shady haunt among Arabian sands. A voice of thrilling never was heard in springtime from the cuckoo bird, breaking the silence of the seas. यही चीजें उसमें भी आपने देखी, बर्ड्स की पिक और उनके बारे में उन्होंने बताया, तो कितनी सिमिलैरिटी है. A voice of thrilling never was heard in springtime from the cuckoo bird, breaking the silence of the seas among the farthest Hebrides. Hebrides means very, very far away from the islands. Will no one tell me what she sings? The poet questions to himself because he does not understand the language of that girl. Will no one tell me what she sings? Perhaps the plaintive numbers flow for old unhappy far off things and battles long ago. Or is it some more humble familiar matter of today? Same natural sorrow, loss or pain that has been and may be again. He is thinking, he is imagining. It may be some story, it may be some sad story, or it may be some pleasure story, but he does not understand. But even then he is captured and caged in her style of singing. The last stanza is, whatever theme the maiden sung in her song could have no ending. I saw her singing at her work and over the sickle bending. I listened motionless and still, and as I mounted up the hill, the music in my heart I bore long after it was heard no more. The song, its tune and scene was everlasting to the poet. Mujhe bhi, these poets, not only William Wordsworth, but Y.B. Blake's, William Blake's, and so many other. I remember the poet, you might have also read, Chaucer, of 14th century.
Yeah, so we will go on from here. Thank you so much.
These things made us poet.
Yes,
these poets
wonderful.
made us poet. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Wonderful. That was really nice. And we are now come to the end of our program today. It's been a very enriching experience, you know, visiting these immortal poets that we have and the rich poetry that they have left behind for us to enjoy. So I will soon be sending you the topic for the next poetry session. For all the listeners, we have this program every fortnight. and it is for poetry lovers and also to encourage more and more people to take to poetry writing. It's never late. It's always good to take up a pen and express your feelings. That's all poetry is all about. I think there was one Kamal Suryavanshi who wanted to read a poem for us, but I hope she will participate next time. We are already at the end of the program, so I really apologize for that. Is it a short poem that you wanted to read, Kamalji?
हाँ, शॉर्ट है और आपने चांस दिया इसलिए बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद मैडम।
हाँ जी, जो ओके,
निराला जी की शॉर्ट है।
हाँ जी, पढ़िए, हम निराला जी से एंड करेंगे।
अच्छा, धन्यवाद।
वेरी गुड। या
जब मनुष्य की उम्र ढल जाती है तब जब उसे बुढ़ापा आ जाता है तो बहुत बुरे दिनों से उसे गुजरना पड़ता है। बुढ़ापे में जीवन की सारी कोमलता कम होती है या नष्ट हो जाती है। शरीर, मन, चाल ढाल सब कुछ बदल जाता है। मन भी थक जाता है और उसके सगे संबंधी या दोस्त भी उससे दूर हट जाते हैं। अकेलापन महसूस होने लगता है और ऐसी स्थिति में नया कुछ करने की उमंग भी उस मनुष्य में नहीं रहती। इस बुढ़ापे की व्यथा को कवि सूर्यकांत त्रिपाठी निराला जी ने अपने मैं अकेला इस कविता में व्यक्त किया है। वह कविता मैं आपके सामने प्रस्तुत करने जा रही हूँ।
थैंक यू।
मैं अकेला, मैं अकेला, मैं अकेला, मैं अकेला, देखता हूँ आ रही मेरे दिवस की सांध्य बेला। मैं अकेला, मैं अकेला, मैं अकेला, मैं अकेला, पके आधे बाल मेरे, पके आधे बाल मेरे, हुए निष्प्रभ गाल मेरे, हुए निष्प्रभ गाल मेरे, चाल मेरी मंद होते जा रही है, चाल मेरी मंद होते जा रही है, हट रहा है मेला, हट रहा है मेला, मैं अकेला, मैं अकेला, जानता हूँ नदी झरने, जानता हूँ नदी झरने, जो मुझे थे पार करने, जो मुझे थे पार करने, कर चुका हूँ हंस रहा यह देख कोई नहीं बेला, कर चुका हूँ हंस रहा यह देख कोई नहीं भेला, मैं अकेला, मैं अकेला, मैं अकेला, मैं अकेला, देखता हूँ आ रही है दिवस की ये सांध्य बेला, मैं अकेला, मैं अकेला। धन्यवाद मैडम।
वाह वाह वाह, आपने तो 4 चांद लगा दिए हमारे प्रोग्राम में। वेरी गुड, एक्सीलेंट, एक्सीलेंट। I really appreciate all your enthusiasm in participating in this program. Thank you very much. Have a lovely weekend.